South Africa's got many, many problems, but we're trying to solve all the wrong ones, the ones that don't overly matter. The ones that really matter, we run away from. And by far the biggest problem that we've got in South Africa is our unemployment crisis and grinding poverty. It is a disgrace that in a country like South Africa, with all of the natural gifts that this God has given this country, that we have children going to bed hungry at the end of the day. And what are our politicians doing while this happens? They're arguing about the words of a song. When what people need is they need the dignity of a job. They need the opportunities to improve their own circumstance. They need to feed their children. How do we do it? Well, there is only two things that need to happen for an economy to provide what our economy needs to provide. One is that we need to get more businesses started in this country so that we can create more employment. And two, we need to get money into the economy from outside of the economy. In other words, international money. And I'll explain to you how both of them tie in. Small business, as we call it in South Africa, you're not going to go to another country and call it small business. That is the most demeaning thing that I've ever heard, because businesses are important regardless of the size. You don't think of your local dentist as a small business, right? You think of him as providing a vital service. It's politicians that talk about small businesses in demeaning terms, like they'll call people that don't have a lot the poor, as if they are some kind of underclass. But we need more businesses. Now, the problem starts, as most of our problems in South Africa starts and roughly ends, with our politicians. Our politicians seem to have a crazy understanding of business. Firstly, they don't really trust business. They don't really like business. That's obvious in their language. They've got a deep distrust of this, and I think they still secretly hark back to the days of the Soviet Union and wish that South Africa could run on the same basis, that you're going to have 5-year plans and big factories run by the state. But we're not there, and we'll never get there. But in the meantime, we've got what we've got, and we should be doing better. Our politicians seem to think business comes in two categories: corporations and spaza shops. And they don't know that the world actually lies between those. Why do they think they understand corporations? Well, they feel that they understand corporations the same way a child would think that they understand corporations. They see the adverts on TV, they see the branding everywhere, they see the name on the back of a football jersey. And they think that's business. Well, here's news for you. That's like taking the 100-meter final at the Olympics, sprinting final, and think every human runs like that. No, those corporations have been around for generations, and they've grown into these massive businesses. Now, politicians love those businesses because those are the businesses that employ their comrades when they need to give some shares away because of some crazy scheme. Those are the kind of businesses that give you a big office with nothing to do but to attend a board meeting every quarter. And they think it's so easy because you just walk into a shop and everything works. You walk into a bank and there's a bank in every town, and there's an ATM and it's magically got money that comes out of a little hole. Or you just go to a fancy restaurant or buy your shiny, spiky shoes, and you just go and use this card or your phone, and it just, links to a network. They don't think of the millions of interactions and everything that happens in between to get those products done. What they also don't think about is those big corporations love nothing more than miles and miles and miles of red tape. Why do corporations love red tape? Because they can manage it. They've got a cost of thousands. Give me more red tape. I'll employ more lawyers and accountants to deal with your red tape. But it keeps out the opposition. keeps out any competition. It means that some clever entrepreneur can't challenge us. So in a country, you can tell a country that has an economy that's doing poorly because its big companies are really big. They dominate everything. In other words, they make sure that there's a high enough wall, deep enough moat around their business that stops any competitor from coming into the market. And our useful idiots in government comply by creating all kinds of laws that keep those big companies big. So now, because they've got one or two comrades that have got positions in these companies, our politicians think that all businesses are like corporations. Or they think all businesses are spaza shops. You know, you go and buy 100 rands worth of goods and hopefully by the end of the day you sold them for 200 rand. And it's nice, it's easy, it's simple. And the government thinks that you either work for a corporation or you run a spaza shop. What they don't understand is a factory that employs 100 people, that creates products, that sells products, that solves problems. They don't think of what goes into running a proper services business or little construction company. They have got no idea. They call it small business, but it's anything but small. Because you know the kind of work, effort, and planning that goes into a business like that, as well as the risk. So let's talk about what our problems are that these companies face, and then hopefully we'll get to some kind of solution to our problem. For starters, what are the problems? Well, business in South Africa has got red tape up the wazoo. We have got more red tape than any other country in the world. We are the world champions at red tape. We've spoken about this so many times. We all live the nightmare of government red tape. As I said, that is brought along largely because their mates, who used to be their comrades, who are now in these big companies, get told, more red tape, because corporations love red tape. But unfortunately, the laws apply to everybody. So small business, as we call it, or business as I call it, has to comply with this red tape. All right. In Rwanda, for example, you can do your entire registration of your company in one place, in one visit. I registered a company and I had to get a VAT number, and it took me the best part of a year to get the government to give me a number so that I could give them money. That's pretty crazy. That just shows you red tape, how inefficient it is, and it just slows down all progress. We've got no growth in our economy. Why have we got no growth in our economy? Because our government thinks it's a very good idea to pass a whole lot of legislation that will ensure that we have no growth in our economy. And we've spoken about it to death. Things like the Expropriation Act mean that you're not going to see any foreign investment, right? You're going to struggle to see local investment. We've spoken about it, and now they're even debating it in Parliament, the BEE laws and how ridiculous they are, employment equity. All of these things which are just standing in the way of growth of the economy, just distracting people from what they need to do, which is to get to work. Right? So no growth in the economy. How do you get growth in the economy? Well, quite simply, growth just comes from economic activity. But in any country, you've just got a pool of money. And what we need is for this pool of money to be expanded. That pool of money that could be expanded comes from two places. One is that we've got some South Africans with money. We know who they are. They're out there. Big companies, rich people, etc., that have got money, but they're looking around and they're saying, I do not see the opportunity to turn this into a profitable investment. Therefore, I'm not going to invest in the economy. That sucks money out of the system. The other way that we get our economy to grow is to get money from an external source. In other words, foreign investors. And this is where everybody always talks about foreign investment, but perhaps they don't understand. Because what happens is, When somebody buys a product that's made in South Africa and it goes overseas, they're paying us money. That's new money that's coming into the economy, and that's going to equal economic growth. Okay? So why aren't we getting that kind of investment? Well, we touched on the laws, which are crazy. So, we've already made sure that we aren't going to get that. Our two most, immediate sources of income, relatively immediate, because it's going to take a long time if we decide that we're going to start making iPhones in South Africa. We'd have to build a factory. We'd have to train people. We'd have to do a whole lot of steps to get those things produced. So let's look at where we could start tomorrow. South Africa is blessed with minerals. We could mine our minerals. South Africa has got some wonderful tourism attractions. We could get tourists into South Africa. But in both cases, we've got ministers that stand in the way. In one case, on the mining side, we've got Minister Gwede Mantashe, who won't give anybody any mining licenses. He doesn't want to let other people mine our minerals. He wants to keep it, I presume, all to himself. We know about some of his mining deals with him and his family, legendary. That's why he was in the Zondo Commission. So we've stopped the opportunity of making money out of mining, which is obviously our immediate source of money. We've gone from being the biggest mining country in the world to out of the top 20. The other one could be tourism. But there we've got Minister Senzo Mchunu. Senzo Mchunu, if you don't know, is the Minister of Police. Seems like a nice enough guy. Everybody talks highly of him. Don't see it in the crime stats. You're not going to go to a country where there's a chance you might wake up dead. Who's going to go? There's other places to go on holiday to. South Africa's a long-haul destination. In other words, it's a long way away from anywhere. Even from our African counterparts, they have to come from literally a long way away to come to a holiday in South Africa. So in other words, if you are sitting in Europe or Asia and you decide you need a holiday, it's either South Africa or it's Australia or it's Europe or it's Asia or whatever it is, you're going to get onto a plane for a long time. Well, I want to know that I'm pretty safe. And I'll tell you what I don't want to do is I don't want to go to a place like that where I can't go out when it's dark. Or I can't go to a restaurant because the lights might go out. Tourism's a delicate thing. You want to go to a place where you know that you're going to come back from that place with a suntan. We could offer that to that, but we choose not to. We remember our president going to the White House and telling the president of the United States that we don't have a genocide of white farmers. In fact, we're trying to kill everybody. So then there's absolutely no tax differentiation between big business and small business. So therefore, there's no tax relief for a small business. In other words, if you start a small business, sorry, you're on your own. You're going to pay the highest rate of tax. That's just all there is to it. You're also going to have to comply with some pretty crazy labor regulations. Right? And if you do start that factory and you do employ more than 50 people, they're going to tell you who to hire. So your company can get this successful, then you get over 50 people, then they're going to walk in there and they're going to walk in with a pencil and start to test the people that have helped you build that business and whether they can still keep working there. Goes without saying, you can't start a business without reliable, good services. You can't have a business if the roads don't work, if the electricity is unreliable, if the water doesn't run out of the taps. We've discussed this ad nauseum. And similar to tourism, small businesses and smaller businesses are uniquely vulnerable to crime. If you've got a shop and somebody decides to steal something from you, it can be devastating to your business. Or if you've got some manufacturing thing, losing one piece of equipment could cost you a business. But if you've got a medium-sized business and suddenly a construction mafia decides to move in on you and the police don't answer their phones, you're susceptible. It's the end of your business. These are just some of the steps that I'm not sure our politicians really understand. that they need to solve, because they are the only ones that can solve it. So let's understand that the sweet spot lies between what the politicians think business is, and that is a corporation with thousands of people, and a spaza shop with 2 people. They don't even know the skills that it takes to run that spaza shop. That's why we had the problem that we had, where they set upon foreigners that were running spaza shops. Why were the foreigners running spaza shops? Because they are quite difficult to run. What happens in the middle of the month when one of your good clients wants credit? Now you've got a problem. You suddenly turn into a bank manager, and you need to have skills. And sadly, in South Africa, we talk about business as if it's the last thing you do if you can't get a government job or a corporate job. So, before we go out there and say that the problem is with the foreigners, local people sold those spaza shops to the foreigners to run because it was too difficult for them to run. If they were so easy to run, the locals would have kept on with those shops. I'm not saying that we must get foreigners to run our businesses, but we should just acknowledge that these businesses are difficult and take skills to run. We have to grow the sector of the market, whether we like it or not, to use our president's favorite statement at the moment. Right? We have to get those businesses that lie between corporations and spaza shops. Otherwise, our economy goes nowhere, and our people will just get poorer, and our unemployment will just get higher. Our president should be using his platform to talk about this at every turn, not telling us that by transforming the management between one person and another as if that's going to solve an economic problem. It's not. It's going to solve an economic for one person and create a problem for another. It's not growing the economy. Swapping the people out isn't going to grow the economy. New businesses will grow the economy. But I suppose we can't expect a person like President Ramaphosa to understand it when he thinks business works like this, where somebody pitches up at your farm, drops off millions of rands in cash for cows that he never bothers to collect. To you and I, that's not really business. We don't have the option, but I can understand why the president thinks that's business. This economy has to grow. We have to take business serious if this country is going to succeed. One business that is succeeding, Pace Car Rental. They keep us on the air. Support them. You'll get a discount if you use them. And another place is going to give you the best information in State of the Nation. Subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been My Opinion with Mike Sham. Every business needs a world-class video to show to your clients and prospective clients. When the Stream-In team isn't filming the State of the Nation, they are producing those world-class videos for companies just like yours. They have got all of the equipment, drones, microphones, whatever you need, and the technical know-how to film a proper video for your company. Visit their website.